Hi everyone, Keenan Likes Cars here. From iRacing to Project Cars 2 to rF2 to the bespoke sim Assetto Corsa Competizione, GT3 is a popular car class in sim racing in addition to real life. One of the reasons for this is the sometimes dreaded BOP that allows a variety of body styles to achieve relative parity. However, part of the reality of BOP is that different cars will excel at different tracks, such as how the small, high downforce cars such as the R8 will be quicker on tracks with medium to high speed corners, and the big cars such as the Botniaring will be quicker on tracks with long straightaways, as greater straight line speed compensates for the lower speed in the corners. So I decided to do a hot lap comparison of all cars from the GT3 and the GT3 Challengers pack in rF2 2 across two circuits. Botniaring, as it roughly replicates a street circuit, then in part 2 of this video series, Silverstone, for its high average speed. Now, I find typically default setups in most sims aren't the greatest, and that some are better than others. So, keeping fuel level at 14 liters, normalizing the tire pressure, and for the Challengers pack, disabling the ABS and traction control, a somewhat decent baseline setup was established for each car before putting in the lap time. So, let's get started. So let's start off with the Radical. The car feels very much like a sports racer with a lot of underbody downforce. You have to drive it accordingly, and as much as the car really wants you to drive it aggressively and throw it around, you have to be careful to keep the cushion air under the car and not disturb it by attacking the curbs or really being too aggressive with the car. Of course, the flip side to all this downforce and grip is that the car is slower in a straight line. However, Botniaring really isn't a track where that lack of top speed makes much of a difference, as the car hit the median top speed of the group of 140 kilometers per hour. It also set the third fastest time around Botniaring of the group. Next we have the Callaway, which is probably the best sounding GT3 car with that big American V8. Of course, with that big 6.2 liter LS motor up front, the car expectedly has some understeer from the engine weight. But that engine sure compensates in straight line speed, with the Callaway hitting the highest top speed of the group of 243 km an hour down the back straight. The car is fairly forgiving and is definitely one of the easier cars to get to a decent lap time. With the ability to drive in deep and keep the weight over the nose through the slow corners, this car set the 4th quickest lap time. Next we have the Boatley, aka Bentley Continental. The car definitely feels like a bigger car with a lot of body movement. Stiffening the car and roll took away grip from the car, making it slower and feel really clumsy in the slow corners. The car felt really compromised for a circuit of this type. To add to the difficulty, the Bentley is the only right-hand drive car out of the set of GT3 cars, so adjusting back and forth was a bit tricky. Botniaring straights are not long enough for the Bentley to make up for the lack of cornering speed, as it only hit 240 km an hour down the back straight and only set the 8th fastest lap time. The McLaren 650S GT3 is one of the best balanced cars of the group. I always find the McLaren GT3 cars are a bit odd to set up, whether it's on iRacing, Assetto Corsa, the 12C or the 650S. The cars feel like the rear roll center is quite high. So it always feels to me that the rear rolls quite a bit and that the anti-roll bar should be stiffened when the opposite is true. Another car that topped out the back straight 140 km an hour but had good slow and mid corner speed, the 650S was the second quickest around the Botniaring. Last up from the GT3 pack is the Mercedes-AMG GT3. The car feels very similar to the 650S, but has slightly more understeer. probably due to the difference in front, mid, and rear mid-engine layouts. The difference is caused as having a lump of mass, such as an engine, away from the center of gravity creates a torque around the center of gravity. The mass being in front helps with stability, which is why a dart has a heavy bit at the front. Going rearward has the opposite effect, and of course the further away you are from the center of gravity you are, the larger the effect is. But more on that later. The performance difference between the 650S and the AMG GT3 was very small, with the Mercedes setting the fastest time by only 0.04 of a second. First car to set a lap from the GT Challengers pack is the Audi R8 LMS Ultra GT3 very long name. The tire feels different on this set of cars, as if the tire is stiffer and there's less grip in the middle of slow speed corners at peak slip angle of the tire. With that said, you can definitely tell that the R8 has the highest downforce out of all the set of the GT3 cars, as it felt planted mid-speed corners and was verified by the lowest trap speed of 137 kilometers down the back straight. Without many in medium and high speed corners at Botniaring to make up the difference, the R8 was the slowest of the cars, however only 0.9 of a second slower than the quickest time. Next up was the most recent addition, the Aston Martin Vantage GT3. Now I don't know if it was related to the last minute licensing approval for Studio 397 or the difference in removing driver aids or whatever, but this car definitely had the worst default setup. The dampers have such a wide range of adjustment, getting them close was really tricky. It definitely felt like the tire in the car were at a bit of disadvantage through the tight corners, as the car had a tendency to understeer, as well as be a little bit unsettled over the bumps. The Aston only managed to be 9th fastest. The M6 GT3 felt fairly similar to the Botleaf, which makes sense considering the similar dimensions. The biggest difference is that the BMW was designed to make use of the electronic aids, being the only car that did not have a changeable differential preload. This means that you had to be super careful on the throttle without the traction control, as the rear end would tend to snap and be hard to catch. A little more time working on the fast bump would bring a bit more time, but the car still struggled in the hairpins and slow speed corners. End of speed straight was a recurring theme here at 140k an hour, but it did just narrowly beat the Bentley for 7th by 0.03 of a second. While I think the 650S GT3 is a fantastic looking car, the 7GTS GT3 is, Well, let's just say I think form follows function more with it. But on that note, the visibility out of the front of the car is absolutely fantastic. Now, I don't know if the tie-in with McLaren Shadow or not made a big difference, but the default setup was probably the best of the set of cars. I didn't need to spend as much time to get the car pretty good. I think the difference in the tire was the only real reason the time difference was anything different from the 650S, putting the lap time 3/10 slower and good for the 5th fastest time around the Botniaring. Finally, we have the Porsche 911 GT3R. Now remember how I talked about engine placement earlier? Well, this is where it really applies with the Porsche. Well, with the engine over the rear axle, it's a bit like throwing a dart backwards, but Porsche does a fantastic job of making it work with tire sizing and suspension. However, the car does have its quirks that do require a different driving style. Because of that rear engine location, you need to roll on the brake more than a sharp stab under heavy braking, or the car really wants to swap ends, kind of like if you throw a dart backwards. Once in the corner, the car behaves very much like a front-wheel drive car, as weight transfer to the rear causes understeer, so you have to drive the car pretty deep into the corner with the weight over the nose. The GT3R made the 6th fastest lap time, albeit another 3/10 down on the McLaren 720S GT3. Interestingly, the cars seem to form 3 different close groups, with all 10 cars within 1 second. It'll be interesting to see the difference downforce and faster corners make around the much faster average speed Silverstone. So if you like this video, please hit like, subscribe, ring the bell, or whatever it is that works with YouTube's algorithm these days. See ya!